Okay. We will first discuss a little bit about events. Okay. So, how to handle events in the browser. And then we will see an example. I'm not sure if we will be able to finish the example in the room, but I will provide the whole code, which is already here on the computer for the what we are going to try to do. I mean, we are taking the page of the question and answers, what we did on Monday, and we add something, but not writing the information manually, but using the JavaScript methods, creating nodes and so on. Okay? But first, event handling. So JavaScript uses an event-driven programming model. I mean, we saw it from the first lecture of this course. And in the browser, events are determined by the element. So there is an element in the DOM tree that creates the event, except the previous example. I mean, the previous example was a timer, right? But I mean, when the user interacts with the page, it's interacting with some elements. The whole page, I mean, the body, or some more specific elements, the paragraph, the button, and so on. And then there is a type of generated event. It can be a click, can be a double click, a right click, can be input from the keyboard, and so on. Okay? How do we handle these events? Well, some search is very simple. I mean, there's just one method, add event listener, that takes a function. Okay? So it takes a callback. We pass a callback. This callback will be called when the event happens. Okay? It's a click, and the event happens. You click, and the callback will be put into the callback queue, and it will be executed. Okay? So actually, it takes the two parameters. One is the name of the event. So it's really a string, load, mouse down, click, whatever. And the second one is the reference to a function. Typically, you define a callback in line, typically with the arrow syntax, because it's so convenient, right? So the parameter of the callback that you pass is the event. And now we see what is the format of this event object. Okay? Good. So, window add event listener. Well, of course, there must be an event that matters with the object on which we are attaching the event listener. Okay? Okay, so like link, you can mouse down, click, double click, whatever. Okay? Window, it probably makes sense only with event like the window has loaded everything. So, DOM parse, what's the name? I don't remember. I mean, the parsing of the HTML is finished and so on. There are events to which you can attach code. Okay? So, how is the event object created? I mean, it's created by the browser. It's provided by the browser. So, this is the specification of the browser. Okay? So, in the DOM, it says when an event happens, the browser passes to the callback an event object that has many properties, including target, that is actually the reference to the DOM element that originated the event. So basically, the element on which I clicked, okay, on which I interacted with. And the type of the event, because I can attach multiple event handlers for different events to the same element. Okay? So this add event listener can be used multiple times for the same event, even for different events, but even for the same event to attach more than one callback to the same node. Of course, it's a quite unusual case, right? Typically, you want to handle everything in a single function. But, I mean, you just add listeners. And when the event happens, the browser takes the corresponding code as it is put into the callback queue, and a parameter is passed to this callback in the form of this event object, so that your callback can decide on the basis of the parameter what to do. Okay? It has a reference to the node in case it needs to modify it, which is the typical case, or and it knows which event it must handle. Because often you write a single function maybe to handle different events, like single click, double click, and you want to, just write once the code and then do different things depending on the event type. Okay, so there are quite a number of event categories. User interface events, as the one we saw before, load. You can attach events to scroll. Every time you scroll, something might happen in JavaScript. So you generate an event, a callback is called, and you can do something. That's how all the advertisement in the web works, right? Every time you touch the page, an event happens, and you execute some callback that typically open a new advertisement, move something, and so on, and it changes the appearance of the content. Okay. Focus or blur events. So when an object takes the focus, so you move it on it, or it's blurred, so it means it loses the focus. Mouse events that are the most typical ones. The click, double click, mouse over. Even if I just arrive with the mouse over something, that's an event that we can handle in JavaScript. So it's quite flexible. I mean, you see the list, it's quite long. Keyboard events, of course, you type something, and these are all events. It's a single key press, key release, and so on, or just new characters, etc. So a change in the content can be an event, and so on. Even animations can generate events. I mean, as usual, we will focus only on the important ones that is important for us for understanding the rest of the course. Okay? But just to give you an overview of all events, just remember that basically you can attach code to basically any kind of important event that might happen in your browser window. Many events cause a default behavior, like as I told you before, you click on a link, you go to the new link, the browser loads a new page. You click on the submit button of a form, and the form is submitted to the server. Why? Because this was the default behavior of all browsers in all days. I mean, it's still the same default behavior applies to modern browsers because they want to keep compatibility with the past. If you load a page that has no JavaScript, you want that when you click on a link, you load a new page. Otherwise, all the pages will not work anymore, right? But this is bad for our modern application, for single pages application, because we don't want to load anything new, okay? And so sometimes we will have to prevent the default behavior of the browser. This can be done, and it's quite easy. There's a method on the event object that is passed to the callback that we can call. We say prevent default, and the browser will not perform the default event, the default behavior when the event happens, which is typically loading a new page that destroys our single page application. Okay, that's when we will use this method. Okay. But in general, if there's a behavior you don't like, you just say prevent default, and then with your JavaScript code, you create a behavior you like. Well, this is a set of events for page life cycle. I mean, when the page gets loaded, well, actually, the browser finished loading all external resources, but there is this is the one that I was looking before. DOM content loaded. So the browser's loaded HTML content, and the DOM tree is ready. So you can start working on the DOM tree, okay? Which is a bit different from loading, because after you load the JavaScript code and so on, if you load them with the fare and so on. And there is also this before unload or unload. That is the way in which they make the window appear when you want to load a new website, right? So Are you really sure you want to leave this page? Basically, they intercepted this unload or before unload event. But unfortunately, it's not really totally reliable because different browsers implement it in different ways. So, and not always they fire the event, they start the event. Okay, but it's just for completeness. Okay. In our case, we will focus mostly on form controls and events on forms, because the forms are the way in which the user can interact more with the application. Forms are, the boxes and the buttons by which the user interact with the application. Okay. So how do we declare a form? First, there's a tag specifically designed for this purpose. So you create a form with a form tag that was available basically since the old days of HTML. Okay, so forms came before JavaScript and so on, because the browser handled the forms and the controls and so on. Okay, and it did this submit action as well. Form takes a URL to be used for submission, this attribute action, but again, and the method, HTTP method to use, but actually we are not going to use this system because ours is a single page application. We will intercept the submit event and execute our code on submission, okay, without reloading the page. Because if we let the submission go on, basically the browser will reload the page, okay? And inside the form, you will find, HTML content, whatever content is needed, and the form controls. What are the form controls? Basically, the basic element that creates a form. Input boxes, buttons, and stuff like that. So form controls can be, categorized in different ways. For instance, we have the input controls, selection controls, button controls, and then there can be support elements, to better design the forms, but not really important here. Each element should be uniquely identified by the value of the name attribute. This is important. It was really, really important for the old days because the browser had to do everything, and when you submit the content of a form, it needs to say which value was attached to which form control, okay? But it's important for us as well, because if we identify each element with a name, it will be easier to handle them in our JavaScript code. So, the specification of HTML says that each element in the form should have a unique name that is not the ID, okay? It's really name. Name equal to something. Name is first name, name, last name, name, address, name, phone number, and so on. Okay? So let's see an example. Input tag, that is the most common one, and also the most flexible one. The one that creates typically the boxes where you can type. So it's a text input, and there is a value, an attribute, whose name is value, that hold the text that is put there by the user. And if I use it here, I will fix the value of the control, okay? But it's useful from the JavaScript point of view because through JavaScript we can access the content of the text box using the value property, okay? Or value attribute. So how do you create an input box? Input type text, this is fixed, name, the name you would like to give, and then there are other attributes you can specify, like this placeholder, whatever, text that appears already there in the box to simplify, interacting with the form and so on, okay? And actually, there's nothing that needs to be put here as text between the open and close tag, okay? But we need to close the tag. We say the HTML5 is well formatted, and so the tree need to have a start and then tag at a certain point. Okay, there are a lot of properties also for forms in the document object of the browser. For instance, there is this property forms. There can be more than one form in the same page. So this is actually an array. You can index it with the name of the form, for instance, or the index of the form, and so on. And each one of these properties has a set of properties again, whose name is the name that you put into the controls. Okay, so this is the way in which you can access all the elements of the form in JavaScript in case you need it. Okay, the type attribute of input. You see there are quite a number of them. Well, type button, okay, but we will have a tag as well. Checkbox, password. I mean, password is really like text, but when you type, dots or asterisk appears. Okay, so it's already ready for you. Numbers, and you can also have different types that have been introduced in HTML5. HTML5 recognizes the fact that forms are really important for web applications. So, for instance, you would like to specify a date. I mean, I cannot just type whatever I want as a date. I mean, I cannot have a month with 3 digits and stuff like that. So this control basically allows me to only type something which is a valid date, or maybe it also provides me a way to input dates in an easier way, like you know, with the calendar, move months, years, and so on and so on. Okay, so just clicking without typing and stuff like that. So all this stuff is already implemented, and basically nowadays all browsers support basically all these tags. Yeah, I mean not tags, attributes of type of the tag input. Yeah. So yeah, they are a way to simplify taking input from the user, especially when it's quite in a peculiar format. Think about the color. I mean, implementing a color picker is quite complex, would be quite complex, right? If the browser helps me, that's better, right? Of course, I need to search, you know, what format it takes, in which format it gives me the color and so on. But I mean, in general, it helps me quite a lot in simplifying designing the interface for the user. Okay. No, back. Other types, radio buttons. You remember the difference between, well, you know the difference between checkboxes and radio buttons. Radio buttons are like the radio, I mean, very old radios. You had buttons to click, you click on one, the others get unselected automatically. Okay, it was a mechanical stuff, and that was the, you know, analog radios of, I don't know, maybe 50 years ago or more. So only one element can be selected out of all the elements. With the checkboxes, each element is independent from the others. So it can be everything selected, nothing selected, and so on. And other stuff. I mean, we don't really need to spend time on this. Okay. There are buttons, but we are going to see buttons in a minute. Okay. Oops, sorry. Okay. Commonly used attributes for input. Basically, input handles 80%, 90% of the cases of user interaction in forms. So you need to know it very well. And like in radio and checkboxes, there is an attribute checked to decide if the user has checked the element or not. Okay, and you can use it also to make the element appear as checked or not. Okay, so it's both ways. You can read it, but you can also write it in JavaScript. Disabled, you can disable something. You would like to keep it, but I mean the user cannot interact with that. Read only. Required, okay, that's more about validation. Size, sometimes just about you know, showing something which is bigger, smaller, and so on. So just a little bit of appearance. I mean, why it's not controlled by CSS? Well, forms were there in HTML 1.0, okay, like 35 for almost 40 years ago, okay? So, I mean, everything was mixed. CSS didn't exist, okay? So, something comes from the past. Value, as I told you, autocomplete were ints and so on, but I mean, we don't really care. Okay, so other attributes depends on the control type. Like If I have a number, it makes sense specify minimum and maximum. If there is a text, I mean, that is not really useful. Maybe you would like to specify a pattern, a regular expression, whatever you want, a file, the formats and stuff like that. So you need to search a little bit when you need some specific attributes. Labels might be useful for, you know, attaching elements like text to some form controls. Like if you click here on the left, it's the same as you click on the checkbox if in some ways you attach the text to the checkbox, okay? And there is this label for attribute that can help you to do this thing. I mean, just for completeness, I mean, we don't really care about these things at the exam. I mean, yeah, of course, something nicer is more pleasant to see, but I mean, for the exam, important thing, as I told you, is first of all, functionality, the API design, the data exchange, using the correct HTTP methods, having correctly implemented the security aspects and stuff like that. And then, of course, I mean, the interface must be useful for the user. I mean, if I click something, I need to understand where I need to click. And if I click, it should click and work. I mean, but I mean, it's not really important if I click a little bit on the left, it works as well, and so on. Okay? Okay. One thing I would like to mention about form controls is that the appearance might vary quite a lot. If you use the basic form controls, I mean the ones rendered by the browser, and so you see here there's a tag for a text area that is a multi-line input. Okay, the previous one was just a single line. Multi-line, when you type an email, typically you would like to have more space, right? And go new lines and so on. And there is a tag for that, but you see the appearance of the different browsers. Well, how can we fix this behavior? I mean, it's just appearance, I know, but I mean, since it's so simple to fix it, I mean, just rely on good CSS frameworks. Apply a style that is ready to be used with forms, and it will style the same with all browsers. Okay, so I think yeah. Well, you can look at the documentation later, but I mean, in general, I mean, just use the correct HTML tags and let the CSS framework do the rest. Okay, that's the message. Drop-down controls are managed by select. Okay, so sometimes checkboxes are not that convenient, because they stay there in the page, and you would like a drop-down menu, so that appears when you click on it, and that's another element that is useful, or combo box sometimes. It's called like combo box. And let's come to the buttons, because almost all applications have buttons, right? I mean, there is a specific tag in modern HTML that is the button tag, which is the same as input type equal to button. But I mean, let's try to use button because it's more convenient and it's more readable, okay? And it has also some advantages that we'll see in a minute. There can be 3 different types of buttons in forms. Let's say, normal button, that is just a button without any default behavior. And so we need to attach our behavior with the event listener. On the click, we attach some JavaScript function to be executed, and that implements the behavior of the button. And then there are 2 predefined types of buttons, submit and reset, where reset is the easiest one. Reset the content of the form to the initial values, so as when the page was loaded, and submits the forms to the server. And that's a dangerous one, okay? Because submitting to the server means loading a new URL. And we don't want this to happen in modern web applications, in the single page applications, okay? Older web applications wanted this to happen. And the browser collected all the information in the form, packaged it in a certain format, and it sent it to the server for processing. But it also loaded a new page. And where is the, no, sorry. And so we need to remember to say not to, where is the default? Oops. I forgot what's the default to be. Well, anyway, I mean, when you have a submit button, we can use a submit button, it's fine. It will create, it will fire the submit event, okay? We can add an event listener to the submit event, but the point is that we need to remember to do the prevent default operation so that the browser doesn't load the new URL that corresponds to the action of the form, okay? I think it's written somewhere, but I couldn't find it now immediately. What's the difference between button and input type button? Well, actually button can have a content, okay? Because the input type button, it's true it can have a content, but it was not designed to have a content, okay? So, I mean, it's nice to put something in a button sometimes, like images and so on. This is an SVG, but can be an icon and something else. And, you know, basically with the button tag, you can make everything a button, okay? That's a short story. And it's also more convenient from the point of view of readability, as I told you. Okay, so try to use the button instead of input type button. It's not really so different, but sometimes you know, it's more convenient. Styling, I told you, just solve it with CSS. Use the defaults of your CSS framework. Bootstrap has good defaults for this stuff, so no problem for that. I mean, the point is that I mean, it cannot really handle everything. Okay. Something is really browser specific and cannot be dealt with by CSS, okay? Because it doesn't expose properties and so on. So, I mean, if you really need to use this kind of inputs, either you are satisfied with the browser defaults, or you use some packages and so on. So basically, you implement everything in another way. Hopefully, using a library, a good library. So basically, you don't use the form controls, the default form controls of the browser. And so you get the same appearance on all browsers because basically you construct the control in JavaScript directly. Okay. Okay, so suggestion, just use the Bootstrap framework. So try not to invent anything or style everything by hand because it's really difficult writing CSS, especially for input forms, and I mean, there's no point in losing time for doing this, especially because our focus is not about the user interface. Okay, so let's see a few things about events. Well, the events on forms that we really need to understand are the first two, especially the second one, the change, okay? When something changes in the element, for text elements, for instance, you type something, okay, or you change something in the input box, or input, you just change even a single character in the elements. That might be important because depending on what is currently written inside the box, you might want to execute some code and give some feedback to the user. Like, you know that when you type a password, they write you, it's too short. At a certain point, this disappears. Why? Because it detects that the length is enough, or it's missing some uppercase character, it's missing a number, and so on. All these statements are recomputed every time you change something in the box. And how do you execute code for these events? Well, actually, there is this input and change events that you can use on elements of the form to specify the behavior you would like to achieve, like removing a text, adding some text, red text, whatever text in some places in the page, saying the user that something is missing, something is wrong, or everything is fine, etc. Okay? So basically, we will work mostly, and also with the React later in the course, we will work mostly on with these two events, input and change. How do we attach them? Well, we just saw before, add event listener. Okay, there's nothing to invent. So we have a form. There are two input controls, type text, type submit. So one is a button. So we could have specified button type submit. Okay, that's fine. Or input type submit, input type text. And actually here we're missing the name. I mean, everything is compacted because of the slide. Okay, but I mean, how do we attach event listener? Well, we just get the reference to the element in the DOM. How do we get the reference? One of the methods we saw in the beginning. Query selector, get element by ID, get element by name, whatever you like. The important thing is that you get a handle, so a reference to the node inside the DOM tree. And then once you have the reference, you call add event listener with the name of the event and the function, so a callback to be executed when the event happens. Okay? And remember that this callback takes as the only parameter the event object that we saw before. So there is the target, which is actually the reference to the element that fired the event, and then also the type of the event. But the type is a bit less useful, right? Because if we write input here, then we will only be called for input events. Okay, but the event might be useful because event input field value. Yeah, actually, they didn't use it here, but they could have been. They could have written event.value. Okay, event is actually input field for actually the input field for which the event was generated. Okay, so it's more convenient. I mean, I already passed you the node that generated the event. So in case you need to get information, especially you typically want to get the value, it's already available there. Okay. Okay, you can do it with the input, you can do it with the change, and so on. Okay. Good. I mean, you can try these examples yourself. Writing them in Visual Studio Code, for instance. You save an HTML file. You need to put the JavaScript code somewhere, as we did before. I mean, this is really simple JavaScript, so you can put it basically everywhere. And you just do console log, so you open the console of the browser and see the result there. Okay, you just click type and see the result. Okay, here it is. When we have forms, remember, always do the prevent default on submit. Okay? Actually, remember to do it every time you create a form, because also, typically you press enter and the form gets submitted. Okay, if you are in the right place or if there is a button input type submit. Okay, and so I mean this is a condition we would like not to have. Okay, because we are designing single page application. So if we reload the page, we destroy all the status of the client application. Okay, the server is another thing; it's independent. But I mean all the variables and the content of the memory of JavaScript for that page will be destroyed, because loading a new page means reinitializing all the memory and the JavaScript interpreter and so on. So starting from scratch. Okay, and that is something we don't want to see, especially at the exam. If we notice that the page gets reloaded, I mean it's an error, it's a mistake, we will deduct points. Okay, so that's the whole story about DOM. JavaScript, and events. Okay, we keep it short. Why? Because I mean, today and in next lab, I think it's next lab. No, next lab is about HTML. So the second lab on Tuesday, you will write a little bit of JavaScript in your page just to be familiar with JavaScript. And then basically we say, well, we know how to program in JavaScript in a web page. And so we will understand also today, it's quite difficult. We have to write a lot of code. Okay, manipulating the DOM is nice, but it's a lot of code. And so we would like to have a more systematic approach to solve this problem. And this problem will be solved through a library, which is React. That is the rest of the course. Okay. So good. So now if you don't have any questions, we go and try to code a little bit using what we learned today to program some JavaScript behavior directly in JavaScript in our, let's say, first example of a web application. I mean, even though there is no connection between the client and the server, we are still programming on the client today. I mean, we can at least interact with the user, okay, handling events and so on. So let's just go to Visual Studio Code. Okay, I already prepared an example for this lecture that is on GitHub, and if you click on the example, okay, there are the lecture example week number 5, JavaScript. In the break, I committed the test, but it's really, just something basic. And there's this index, which is basically what we saw last time. I mean, a basic page with the question and a list of answers. Okay? Let me load this HTML with the browser. Okay? So, no, finally just solved stuff. Okay? So I open the folder and there is an index. I open with the browser and that's the result. Okay? So nothing really complex. I mean, there's a div at the top because I wanted to use Bootstrap. Okay, I told you to put everything to a div container or container fluid. I mean, depending if you want to resize it or not, but I mean, not really important. And then there's this main part where I have a div class row and a table, class table. So I have the nice looking of Bootstrap for the table. Okay. Okay, so basically there's a table, but actually this table is empty. Okay, so actually, where is the table? Yeah. Okay, so header, the question, okay, which is just fixed text for this example. Okay, nothing loaded from any server and so on. It's just embedded into the file because we don't still have a way to load stuff from a server. And we have this table header, date, text, auto, score, action, and so on. And the body is empty. Okay? And we would like to fill it not by, typing here. That's easy, right? I mean, you just type rows and stuff. I mean, it's really what you are supposed to do actually in next lab. I mean, not tomorrow, but, next week, Monday. Right? Just to be familiar with the HTML. But that's the easiest part, right? What we would like to do is to create nodes in JavaScript of the correct type, like creating rows and elements and so on, and add the content depending on the content of a variable that is defined in JavaScript. So that's the basic step towards, populating the page using the content of a JavaScript variable. Of course, a JavaScript variable, I mean an array that contains information about answers. Okay, so it will be an array of objects because it needs to be something, I mean, a bit more complex than just, some text, right? So, first of all, I need to make sure that I loaded my JavaScript code. Okay, and this has already been done, and this has been done in the way that I explained this afternoon actually. Script defer, source, well, can be day.js, what I wanted to do before, can be, well, later I think there will be, yeah, the bootstrap. We could have loaded with script defer the bootstrap as well. I mean, I don't really care. It doesn't matter. Script defer source app.js, okay? And that's our file. We decide what to write here because it's just our file, okay? I can load the JavaScript from the disk as well, okay? I mean, no path means use the current path for the browser, okay? I mean, today is the only day where we will load the stuff, yeah, just from the local file system, okay? And then from next time, we will have a server and a client, and so things get more realistic. But today, just to experiment a little bit with JavaScript, I mean, keeping things simple means let's load files from the local file system. Of course, the browser allows us to do this because we started from a file from the file system. If we load something from the network, then it will not allow you to load stuff from the file system. Okay, app.js. So what's the content of app.js? Well, very basic stuff. I mean, actually defined an array of, well, actually an array of arrays. Sorry, I was remembering wrong. I mean, it's not an array of objects and an array of arrays, okay? It doesn't really change, you know, our example. I mean, the first element is for the first column, the second element is the second column, and so on, okay? We don't really care too much about this. There are number of strings. I define the function answer. Well, actually, I mean, this is just a convenience function. It's just basically to print the content just in case we need to console log something, okay? So, yeah, okay, we already have a console log. So when we load the page, and if everything is executed correctly, yes, you see what we log with console log here in the console of the browser, okay? In the code I had, you know, console log E string, and E is the answer element of the answer list. And so basically I return just, you know, a nice string to print the answer, okay? Just for debugging. But I mean, that's the easiest stuff, right? Here we need to write something, right? Populate the list in HTML. So I mean, we are in the browser, right? So we have document, create, create element, right? What are we going to create? I mean, we need to decide an HTML element. So I tag. I mean, we would like to create rows and then elements inside the row, right? So, I mean, let's create a tier element, okay? I think, yeah, we started like this. I will provide a full solution at the end. For sure, we will not finish all the stuff. But, I mean, just to, you know, create something for experimenting a little bit, okay? Okay. And of course, we need to assign it to something, right? So, like const new, what did I read? New tr, okay? That's a variable that contains a reference to an object, which is actually a node, a DOM node, okay? Fine. And then, well, actually, we should create something inside this tr, right? So, const new td1. Oh, okay, I suggest too much. Create element td, okay? And then we say well, new td1 should be, I mean, the first column, right? What was the first column of the answer? The text, I think. The ID, we don't care about the ID. So that was the text, right? So what's the name? Yeah, text. No, sorry, new td1 Actually, value is already set. So inner text. Okay, that's the text. Okay, but actually, what's the text? Well, it depends on the answer, right? So, I mean, the answer. Let me do text. Let text equal to. Let me put a fixed string for the moment. Okay, for off. Okay, so let's start with something that is that we can debug. Okay, I can write the whole code and tell you, well, we do like this, so on, and then I show everything works. Okay, but I mean that's not the way in which you are working in the lab, right? You are building things, and you need to be able to debug things while you're creating things. Okay, so at this point we have two elements. I mean, actually two nodes in the DOM, but they're just nodes in not in the DOM, sorry, in the memory of the browser, but they are not in the DOM. Okay, they're just in the memory of the browser. You remember that we wanted to make things appear. What should we do? I mean, we should add them to some place in the DOM, right? So we need to get a reference to the place where we add the element in the DOM. So const table body, yes, table body. That's a name I decided. I mean, it's suggesting because I already have the solution in the same folder. Okay, but I mean, your Visual Studio Code, unless there is AI and so on and whatever, not suggesting that much. Okay, but I mean, table body is just a name I decide for me. That is the reference to what? To document get element by ID. What? I mean, what I put here in the index. You remember that I had the table body ID. Okay? That's really a nice place where to put a unique ID in your page because it's a direct pointer to the element in the HTML where you would like to attach yours. Okay, so get element by ID answers. Oops, I've lost the wind. Okay, here. Answers. Okay, and then table body append child. I must tell you, my memory is so bad. I'm so old also. I only remember one method, that's the append child. And in case you need, to do something, more complex, just look in the manual and Google and so on, okay? But append child is very easy. I mean, you have an element, it's nothing as a children, just append and it becomes the first children. Then it becomes the second and so on, okay? So, table body, append child, the new tr, okay? Sorry, not the string. Oops. New tr. Okay. That's fine. But we still have one element in the memory, new td1, right? So new tr, append child, new td1. Okay? Save. Let's try. That should be enough to see something. I'm not sure if the table is rendered correctly because I'm supposed to have 5 columns and I only have 1 column now because I only have 1 TD. Okay? So I hope the browser works. But at least in the inspector I should see something. Okay? If the window doesn't show something. Yeah, I mean, the browser, as I told you last time, is quite tolerant. Okay? I have a table with a row with 5 columns, and then I just specified 1 column. It shows me something. Okay? It's good. And just check in the inspector. The inspector is there to help you. You see, that's the TR, and the TR has been created by JavaScript. It was not in the HTML. You remember the HTML? No TR. Okay? No TD, no TR. It's been created in JavaScript. Okay. So tr, td for off. And of course, I mean, we can create a second element, just try a second element, and then we will, make something more smarter, let's say. td2, of course, I cannot create two elements of this with the same name. I mean, they are variables, JavaScript variables, okay? Let me put it after. Oops, I lost it. New td2 inner text equal to, what was the stuff? Respondent. Okay, and the respondent was, well, actually, let's innovate a little bit in the code. Okay, answer list, right? Answer list it's an array, right? Yeah, map returns an array, but then it's an array of answers. Yeah, it's fine. So it's an array, so I can index it, and there should be a respondent, right? Because new answer, there's this respondent, okay? And so, I mean, that's a possible respondent. And then again, this is just stuff in the memory of the JavaScript. We need to append it to the DOM. So, new, to which element you would append this one? tr or td1? Well, append child appends a child, okay? So it's nested inside, okay? If you want to use the td1, you need a sibling, okay? If you use the tr, you need a child, a new child, okay? So new tr, append child, new td2, okay? Save. Just debug again. I mean, it's all, I mean, the more you debug, the less problems you have at the end, okay? Every time you make a modification, just make sure you did something that works. Okay, we got the second one. Alice, just check, and you will see, there are two children at the correct point in nesting, okay? So they are siblings, but they are all children of tr. That's fine, okay? And so basically, we can make things more systematic, okay? Because we have to do like 5 columns. And actually, there are different types, like the action is a button and so on. So we need to type stuff for this. But then we have to do different rows. So put everything into a function, right? So, I mean, it's just basic programming. So I will commit this, this point. Okay, so you find it in the history of the commits. And then I will copy and paste a little bit of code, otherwise we won't finish in time. So app.js, so just first JS code. Okay, push. Okay, so the history remains available in the Git, in the GitHub interface as well. And so basically, so we need to do the same for all 5 columns of the table, right? And so let me search for the code. I mean, I just write a function. Create answer node, okay, until here. Well, let me copy everything and then I delete something. Okay, so basically I will, put the function here, okay, just because, to call it later I need to define it before. So there's a create answer node to which I pass an element of the array. So an object, or actually that's an array. Ans text date, yeah, actually, yeah, that's an array. I hope it works. That's an, what's the name? And it's an object. Okay. So I hope yeah, something has been changed in the code. Anyway, I mean that's basically what I did before. I create element TD. Well, I can even create a text node, or I can do, you know, dot inner text. That's the same. Okay, this is just an example. You can create a text node, or you can do dot inner text. That's exactly the same. And then you need to remember that you need to append, you know, if you create a node like the text node, you need to append it to the HTML node. Okay. So if you every time you create a node, you need to append it somewhere in the DOM. Okay. The dot inner text, the dot inner HTML do that for you. Okay. So for text, it's probably easier to use the dot inner text, but I mean, we could change it like new td2 dot inner text equal to ans text. Okay. Let me write it. New td2. That's an alternative. Okay. Inner text ans text. Okay. That's an alternative to the next two lines. Okay. I mean, it's just a way of programming in JavaScript the exact same thing. Okay. Okay, fine. So we create 5 elements. The fifth is a bit more complex. Let me delete this stuff. Okay. We create the tr. We append all the td to the tr. We return the new td. The tr, sorry, the row. Okay, tr, table row. And so let me use this this function and not this code, I mean, which is now old, let's say. Okay. So instead of you know, doing everything manually, now I have a function that creates a table row that is still in the memory. The rest is appended to that table row, but the table row is still in the memory, not in the DOM, so it is not shown yet. And we basically need to write a few lines of code to, you know, cycle over the answers and append the new node that has been created, right? So, so for let yeah. Yeah, what I did here? Ah, yes, that's yeah. Okay. Let ans off. You remember off, okay? Or we could use the for each. I mean, doesn't really change the meaning. Answer list. Okay. So. Const new row equal to, and we have the function, right? So the function was create answer node. Create answer node. And actually ans. Okay. Actually, I was wondering if it was an object or not, but yes, it's an object because I converted here, right? The answer list is a list of objects. I started from a list of lists, so an array of arrays. And it's an array of objects, okay? Because I created them with the new. Const new row, and the new row append, well, actually append child the new row. But to what? Well, exactly to what we saw before. The table body, right? Oops, what did I do? Okay, the table body, okay, save. So I have a function, a for that calls a function that creates the node with 5 children, and I append this new node in the DOM at the same place, the table body that I got by the ID, okay? Let's see the result. Hopefully I didn't make mistakes. No. Okay? So this stuff has been created by JavaScript. Okay? I remind you, I mean, this is the initial HTML. There's nothing inside the body of the table. Everything is created through JavaScript. Okay? Of course, it's a lot of code, I told you, right? That's why we need something simpler, and that's React and stuff. Okay? Okay. So, yeah, I put this in the function, but it's not really important. Let's see how is the button created. Well, actually, it's a TD. I put a button directly inside the TD. Actually, what is the form? Well, the form is not present. So I just told you, you know, something that was wrong. I mean, well, in a certain sense, yes. So, I mean, form is a tag that is basically needed by all the, you know, browsers, right? It's nice to have it in modern browsers as well, because it makes things, you know, a little more sorted, correctly looking, okay? But, you know, we are handling events in JavaScript, so we don't actually care if there is a form or not. I mean, what we care is there an element that we can click? Is there a place where we can type and stuff like that, okay? A form is actually only something that is useful when we need to handle behaviors handle events on forms, okay? Like the submit event is present only on forms. So if we don't have the form tag, we cannot handle the submit event, okay? But I mean, for single form controls like buttons or inputs and stuff, I mean, you can just use them, at least in the beginning, and everything works. So, new button, create element button. I even set the class name, button primary. What does it mean? Well, I loaded Bootstrap, so these are Bootstrap classes. So we rehearse a little bit of Bootstrap here. I mean, just, you know, assign the button class to the button, makes a nice button in Bootstrap, okay? And indeed, that's what you see, okay? Very nice button. And you can even check it here, I mean, in the body with this. It's just written, I mean, translated into HTML, right? A class button primary. Okay, secondary changes color and so on. I mean, this is just details. I also set an ID because it's useful for what I'm doing now. I want to attach an event listener. Well, actually, the event is already attached. The event listener is what I want to attach. So a function that gets called when I click the button, okay? Text content, okay, I mean, just the text content of the button, and append child is fine, okay? So let me try to, you know, add the event listener to the button, okay? How do we add the event listener? We have the add event listener, right? We need to call it on some node, okay? So on the left here, we need to put something. I mean, the button, okay? So we attach an event to the button, new button. Event listener, we would like to attach the click, right? Yes. So click. I mean, how do I know the name is click? I Google it, okay? I search in the documentation. I mean, typically they are intuitive, and we are using very few of them, okay? And then we need a callback. Some code that will be called when I click on the button. If now I click on the button, nothing happens, okay? Because there's nothing connected to the event. I mean, the browser recognizes there is an event click, but I mean, looks in the list of listener to the click, it's empty, do nothing, does nothing, okay? Okay, so event, well, just use, yeah, the syntax, right? Well, okay, I mean, it doesn't like event, no, it doesn't matter. Yeah, just do something. What are we going to do? Well, let's make this button work. Actually, what do you expect when the vote is pressed? Well, the score increases, right? I mean, we should get the handle to the score and in some ways change the content. Let's do a more simple thing in the beginning, okay? Let's assume you are in the lab, you're experimenting, you're starting, okay? Just log something. When you don't know what to do, just log something, okay? Button pressed, okay? Or button pressed ID and ans ID, okay? So I have an information about which button has been pressed. Reload the document. Don't forget to reload. If you don't reload, you still have the old JavaScript loaded. Okay? And this is just debugging. Normal application will not reload, but I mean, we are changing code. So every time we change the code, we reload the code, of course. So click, let me show the console. Click, button press 1. Click, button press 2. Again, click, button press 2. Just be careful that the browser don't like to show the same row twice, 3 times, and so on. I mean, it gives you this 2 saying this line has been printed twice. Because sometimes, for debugging, you have a lot of stuff. Okay, so click, 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 you see it changes. And then if something different is pressed, it is logged, it goes on, it prints the stuff. Okay, fine. Let's try to do this operation, like vote, and we will define a function. Vote, what did I put? Vote, yes. What? We need to identify the row, okay, on which we click the button, okay? I could write answer ID as I did before. That's fine, okay? By the way, this is a closure, okay? When I asked the exam, can you find a closure in this code? Well, JavaScript is full of closures. Every time you define a function, there will probably be a lot of closures, okay? You see, this is a function passed to the other event listener. So answer ID is defined now, and then it goes out of the scope, but it still works. We saw before. I mean, I clicked and it worked, right? Okay, since it's not so convenient sometimes, and sometimes you don't have this information available, even if it goes into the closure, but it's simply not available for some reason, you can get the same information with event target, okay? Event target is actually the new button, okay? And the new button is this ID, which I just set before, okay? So you reflect a little bit on the code we are writing, okay? And of course, I need to define the function. Some place I need to write the function vote, okay? So let me write this function. Function vote, okay? Of course, it takes an ID. It's specific of our code, of our page, and so on. So this ID is basically the number of the row, right? And so how can I now change, the number that I put there? Well, actually, I need to have access to, the information that has been put inside the page, and if I need to change that information, and then to change the content of the page, I need to get the reference to the element that I need to change in some ways, either directly, it has an ID, or indirectly, through the parent, through something else, and then I move in the DOM tree. I go to the children, and I look for the third children, whatever, okay? So it's quite complex, right? So one of the possibilities, that is the one I will give you in the code later after the lecture, is just, change the data structure. So change the answer list, okay, and change the score, and then delete everything and recreate everything. You have a function to recreate everything, right? I mean, we just created everything from scratch. That's a possibility. Of course, it's really bad in terms of efficiency, but that's one of the possibilities. And I would like to mention this possibility here because more or less conceptually is what React will do later in the course, okay? In a more efficient way, of course, otherwise nobody would be using a React, but conceptually, you have some data in the memory, you create the corresponding visual appearance of the data. So you create the HTML element that shows that data. And when you change something, you just recreate the HTML that corresponded to that data, okay? I will provide you with this code, okay? But so it's basically, but we need to write more functions, okay? So like a function to delete everything and so on, okay? I would like to show you that, since here we have the possibility to access the new TD4, okay? Instead of voting here, we just, we can just do this. I mean, new TD4, right? Inner text, okay, equal to the new value. And where do we get the value of the inner text? I think we can simply get it from there. So the same place, new TD4, inner text, text, +1, okay? Save. Let me see. Okay, vote. Okay, that's not exactly what I meant, right? Actually, it was a string. So let's convert it to a number. But you see, I mean, the point is, I have the handle to the node. I just access the properties of the node. I change the properties, the appearance changes. Okay, I just made an error because, it's a string. A string plus a number, it doesn't give a string. It gave me it didn't give me a number, it gave me a string. I hope the parseInt works. So let me see if this works. I'm just live coding with you. Actually, I didn't try this way of solving the exam. So, okay. Yeah, okay, that's good. Okay, so I just forced the JavaScript to do the conversion, string to integer. Just be careful because if there is something which is not a string, it will create an error, okay? So you need to be careful when, doing these kind of things. But the only other option is, going in the code and change the data structure and then reflect the data structure in what you constructed through JavaScript, okay? And note, again, this works because, again, we create a closure on new TD4 in the callback that we pass to the add event listener. So even if it goes out of scope, we don't care. It's always the TD4 of that row. Okay? And for each row, we have the correct TD4 because there's a closure on the correct TD4. Okay? That's fine. Okay, so I think, for the example, that's all. So I will commit this version of the solution. Just let me do it. Really just 1 minute, because I want to show you how to access this the history in case you don't know. Just first JS solution for voting. Okay, push. You always have the history on Git. So you see now there's this stuff. This parseInt and so on. But you don't remember what I did before, right? I did a commit, and so you just go back and you just go back in the history of the commits. Okay, these are the commits. Okay, I click I'll wait a little bit. Well, apart from the fact you can see the differences, okay? But then there is the history of the commit somewhere. Yeah, I think that's a parent commit, right? That's the previous version, okay? So you can even access the history from the web interface, okay? Or if you're familiar with Git, you just pull and check out the previous version and stuff. Okay, but it's more difficult. I mean, in the web, you can easily see what I'm doing, okay? So I think in case there are no questions, sorry, I think that's all for today, right? So we had a lot of things, but it's important to understand that JavaScript manipulation of DOM is complex. It takes a lot of time. So we need something different, okay? That will be React and something that helps us in doing these operations more efficiently. Okay, so tomorrow, the lab for the second group, and next week, lab on both Monday and Tuesday, okay? And then lecture on Thursday as usual. Okay, thank you. No questions, so see you tomorrow for the lab.